and then we're going live now. Now we're live on YouTube.
Okay, so good. We'll just you and I will just hang out a little bit, but we'll just go on mute.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll check in with you right before I get going. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the second lecture here in the Joe Biden series, How Joe Biden Can Win. Really glad to have you joining this. Thank you so much. I was thinking of doing this live from the Lincoln Memorial, but I didn't get permission, didn't get granted permission to have this live television audience at the base of one of our greatest presidents. So I'm going to do it from my basement, but really glad to do that. Honored actually to be here. So fortunate to just be healthy and to chance to do these lectures. Thanks for all joining us tonight. For everybody on Zoom, just want to say, if you have questions as you go or at the end of this, happy to take them. Would appreciate if you would put them in the Q&A and use that. That's a little bit easier for me to get to. I want to start with something fun here tonight. I always trying to kind of grow and learn more about Zoom here. So I want to start with our first attempt at a poll. I want to ask a question of folks. And can you, Paul, our producer, can you pop up the first poll? The poll, I'm going to do two of these if the first one goes well. This first one is just fun. So everybody on Zoom, can you go ahead and answer this question? You're going to actually literally click on this on your computer. Want to try out this new technology with Zoom of polls. These are three of my favorite foods. So I just want to get a sense of like what kind of folks are out here in the Zoom audience tonight. The polling data are coming in. All right, we got 240 out of 260, so like 90, little over 90% of folks have voted. I think we can make a network call now for who wins this election. We're going to go live to Wolf Blitzer in the Situation Room at CNN, and Wolf Blitzer calls it for the cookies. 58% of the folks picked cookies as their number one. Number two, but this was very, very close at number two for delegates. This is important for the delegates. Our toast and hamburgers. Toast comes in at 22%, hamburger at 21%. This is the vegetarian leaning Seattle, Washington. Doesn't surprise me one bit. So the runaway winner though tonight, called as soon as the polls closed, were cookies. Thanks for participating in that. I'm going to do a more serious poll later as we go here, but that was my first crack at it. Thanks a lot. All right. How Joe Biden can win. I want to share with you, first of all, 3 upcoming lectures that you might be interested in. Tomorrow night, I start a 2-part lecture series on voting rights in America, past, present, and future. This has been a major point of my research and focus over the last 6 or 7 years. And would welcome having you there to see these or to see them recorded at your own timing. Talking about kind of the challenges and the struggle for voting in America. It's been long, it's been hard, it's been particularly weaponized by white men in particular. Second, I'm going to do a series on vice presidents from John Kennedy's selection of Lyndon Johnson in 1960 through Joe Biden's selection this year. I'm going to do those on 2 Sunday nights in a row on May 10th and May 17th. That's this coming Sunday and then the following Sunday. Those will be live those evenings. Bring your mother. If you're a mother, bring your kids, or not like literally in person with each other because of COVID, but tell them, come join it. I'm really looking forward to that series. I'm having fun starting to put that one together. And then I'm going to do 2 lectures on American demagogues, looking at demagogues who laid the frameworks for who Donald Trump is, and then unpacking the way in which Donald Trump operates and how it helped him to win in 2016. That's a series that I did an earlier versions of in 2019 that a lot of folks were interested in. And I'm going to distill that down, update it a little bit to hit that on 2 Thursdays, May 14th and May 21st. So come join these. All of these are available for registration from the ticket price of free on up on Eventbrite. If you go to Eventbrite and go to the search function and search for my name, you can find any one of these and you can sign up. Love to have you sign up. The first one starts tomorrow night, voting rights. So I'll be back here live tomorrow night if you're interested. Okay. All right, let's roll. Let's start with the electoral map of 2016. All right. Also, by the way, I think it's likely I'm gonna keep my little visual image up here as I go. I've tried it a couple times now with it off the screen and gotten some feedback from you all, for some of you folks. And I think that by and large, I want to be able to feel like I'm connecting to you all. And so even though I don't get to see you, I can nonetheless just have that sense of being there with you by being able to see myself a little bit, actually, because I can see kind of like the energy I'm putting in, I can see it there. And also, you know, I miss you all. So at least this way, you get to see me, not a big win on your part, but nonetheless. All right, the electoral map of 2016. This is what it looked like. And I know I gave you a trigger warning there by telling you the map was going to come up, that I was going to show the map. So you can see a lot of red here across these states, more red than you're familiar with in the two previous presidential elections. And on election night, it all kind of came down to three states. These states from west to east of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And I remember on election night feeling the beginning of dread, thinking about Donald Trump possibly winning when Florida was called for him. Hillary Clinton had a very big lead coming out of the early vote, but then Trump caught her on election day with election day vote. And as we moved up the map, and Pennsylvania and Michigan were too early to call, according to the broadcasters, and then too close to call. And then Wisconsin was the same. I could just feel it. I could feel it. Yeah. And that my wife and I had considered having a party of folks coming over, but we had decided not to. I didn't know what was going to happen. And that evening of the election night, it was very difficult. My son was very upset. I was mad and angry and frustrated, and so was my wife. But it came down to these three states. And I want to just mention them and talk a little bit about them. So in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee County, not the city, but the county of Milwaukee, which is bigger than the city, Barack Obama in 2012 won 332,000 votes. He received 332,000 votes. In 2016, Hillary Clinton got 288,000 votes, still a ton, but that's a difference of 43,000 votes. And eventually Clinton would lose the state of Wisconsin by 22,000 votes. So there's a lot of ways you can do the math in an election, but if you want to, you could narrow it all down to Milwaukee County and say that she lost almost twice as many votes in that election from 2012 to 2016 as she lost the state by. All right. In Michigan, Wayne County is the county that is Detroit. It's also a few western suburbs, including where I grew up, Dearborn, Michigan. Wayne County is, in 2012, Barack Obama got 595,000 votes. In 2016, Hillary Clinton got 519,000 votes, a difference of 76,000 votes. She loses, Trump wins, Clinton loses the state by 10,700 votes. More than enough votes difference between 2012 and 2016 in Wayne County alone to account for the loss of Clinton, the victory of Trump. And in Pennsylvania, when you look at not Philadelphia and not Pittsburgh, you look at the rest of the state, which is often referred to. There's a joke in Pennsylvania of like, what do you call the mid Pennsylvania between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia? What do you call Pennsylvania between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia? You call it Alabama. Okay, it's a much more conservative part of the state, and Obama got 200,000. In 12, Clinton got 188,000. In 2016, difference of 121,000. Trump wins the state by 68,000 votes. Across these three states, Trump ends up winning the electorate, the presidency, by 22,000 plus 10,000, that's 32,000 plus 68,000, 100,000 votes. He wins the presidency on the strength of these three states. And ever since then, Democrats have been existing in a post-traumatic stress disorder kind of space, worried about those states, focused on those states, thinking about those states, and Trump too, thinking about those states, worried about those states, spending a lot of time making sure that people in those states are happy. This is part of why he had some troubles recently in that he criticized Gretchen Whitmer, the governor in Michigan, very popular governor, and that's not the best thing to do if you're trying to win re-election in that state. But since 2016, everybody's been fixated on those three states, and we need to be focused on those three states. But there is an expectation that we're going to rerun 2016. Every election, you kind of think it's going to be the same as the last. And I want to move ahead now to the electoral map of what 2016, I'm sorry, let me back it up. I forgot, I moved a slide. The slide's going to be later in here. So I was trying to think of like, what happened to the slide? No, it's going to come up later. I remember I moved it about an hour ago. So go back to this. I'm going to go back to this for a second. So since 2016, Democrats have been fixated on those states. How do we win those states back? In the work that I do in Common Purpose, we certainly are invested in those states in a substantial way. And it wouldn't possibly have all come down to those three states until this became an election that's really about coronavirus. This is a major shift. It has shifted the entire terrain of the argument about the presidency, who should be president, what are the characteristics of what would make a good president. So the coronavirus reality has moved this away from a three-state focus in the upper Midwest to a much bigger kind of discussion and argument, all right? When we look at Joe, so I want to talk about two phases of the coronavirus election. I first want to talk about the Democratic primary for just a minute, and then I want to pivot to talk about the general election that's going on between Biden, essentially Biden as a presumptive nominee for the Democrats, and Donald Trump. Let's just spend a moment on the Democratic primary first. Joe Biden's rise in the Democratic primary tracks with when the coronavirus becomes a bigger issue, when people are starting to pay attention to it. We can look at the debate in Nevada, in Las Vegas, which occurs before the February 22nd caucuses in that state. So it's 3 days before the caucuses. So it's February 19th is the debate in Nevada, Las Vegas. I had the privilege and honor to go to that debate with a colleague, Ellen Ferguson. And at that debate, there was no discussion of coronavirus at all. None. You might recall that was the debate in which Elizabeth Warren eviscerated Michael Bloomberg. But there was no discussion of coronavirus. The next week, there's a debate in South Carolina, and roughly about half of the debate is about coronavirus, okay? So I want to track public concerns about coronavirus. This is a body of data that is on the 538.com website. And it's simply tracking a poll question that's been asked very regularly ever since coronavirus began to become an issue. How concerned are you about coronavirus or COVID-19? And the four possible options are not very concerned. Well, let me put them in order from one side to the other. There is very concerned, somewhat concerned, not very concerned, not at all. Those are the answers. Very, somewhat, not very, and not at all. Okay. In kind of late February-ish, not very concerned was the most among the public, and then there was somewhat, and then there was not at all, and very was at the bottom. Very concerned was at the bottom. All right. We can track these over time until we get to early February, and that's the period of time that I'm interested in because we see kind of the relevant data I want to focus on here. And we see real shifts over time. The not at all, which is the third on the left side, goes all the way down to the bottom by far by the time you get to early April. The not very, which is at the top, goes down to the third, and then the somewhat goes up and the very goes up, and they're neck and neck by the time we get to April. So over the course of a little over a month, 5 weeks, we have this massive shift in public attention and public opinion and concern levels about coronavirus. This shift starts right at the time that Joe Biden's rise happens. So we can look really in this kind of like 10-day window from post Nevada caucuses, when the candidates go to South Carolina and the public's attention starts to turn to the coronavirus in a bigger way, through Super Tuesday. Super Tuesday occurs on March 3rd. So this 10-day window from really the 23rd of February through the 3rd of March. And we begin to see not at all becoming the lowest concern. Like the percent of people saying not at all concerned begins to become the lowest. Very concerned starts to make its way up. Somewhat concerned is making its definite way up, and not very concerned is beginning to drop. So we're beginning to see the concern start to increase as the candidates themselves are talking about it. Each of them begins to talk about what they were going to do or what they would do, and coinciding with Joe Biden winning in South Carolina on February 29th, and then winning big on Super Tuesday on March 3rd. There's two things I think that worked to Biden's advantage. One is his work on the Ebola virus, where he had a point of policy expertise that he could bring to the debates, and it was not in the long, far past to him. It was recently, and Ebola is this very scary thing to people. And so Biden was able to reference that. And then second, it's clear in the evidence that we've seen that the Obama and Biden administration was very prepared for pandemics. In fact, it was post-Ebola in which the Office of Pandemic Responses was created by the Obama administration, and they had passed this along to Donald Trump and his administration, and Trump had then proceeded to cut it, to reduce it, and then to wipe it out, and to reduce a whole bunch of other elements tied to this. There's a really scary book, I might have mentioned this already, called The Fifth Risk. The Fifth Risk by Michael Silver. And it's about the ways in which the Trump administration was not interested and not prepared to take on the everyday things that make a government essential for taking care of us. And the fifth risk is the way in which incompetence can rise to the fore because you're not prepared. And the argument is that the Trump administration exhibits this substantially. The Obama-Biden administration did not exhibit this. They were prepared for a pandemic. And so Biden was prepared, ready, had a body of evidence to speak about this, had credibility on it. And so Biden begins to get a kind of ground that he can dig around and make his own as he talks about coronavirus. On Super Tuesday, on March 3rd, across all the states where there were exit polls, between 51 and 61% of folks say that coronavirus was important to their vote. So over half of voters in all the states that had exit polls said that coronavirus was important to them. And among the folks who said that the coronavirus was important to them, they overwhelmingly selected Joe Biden. For this graph right here just shows the people who said coronavirus was important to them, 51 to 61% across the various states. And Joe Biden captures almost half of the vote. These voters swing substantially to Joe Biden. When I was in South Carolina with a group of folks, spending those 5 days there as the primary was unfolding, as the campaigning was occurring, and it was apparent that Joe Biden had a political leadership opening with the coronavirus. And what wasn't apparent was whether he'd be able to kind of capitalize upon it and make his mark and make his case. In the voters' eyes, in the voters' kind of worldview, he did. And it's probably also the case that some voters began to want a person who had operated at the highest levels of government before to start to move into a position of leadership for us. So long story to cut into the chase is that as coronavirus became more important in the Democratic primary, Joe Biden also ascended. Is not his ascension was also tied to the presence of African Americans and the coalescing of moderate voices behind him, and him kind of figuring out his own voice. Those are the three things I talked about last week: the support of African American voters, him merging his story with the American story, and the kind of coalescence of moderate voters. But the fourth major piece was coronavirus and him being positioned well for it. And there's a kind of school of thought in politics that that much of political success is tied to being the right candidate at the right time. That you have the things that are what are needed or wanted at the right time. And Biden had some of those characteristics at the right time. So he merges with the Democrats, and we're going to have a coronavirus election. Now, it's possible that we wouldn't have a coronavirus general election if Donald Trump had actually been a really good, effective leader off the bat from the beginning. I want to just kind of suggest that here's a different way that Donald Trump and the administration could have come at the coronavirus when it became clear that it was an outbreak and was going to be a massive thing in America. They could have come at it this way. They could have said, look, this is serious. This is going to be the most serious medical issue that we have faced in this country in a long, long time, probably in the lifetime of everybody or most of us who are alive. It's going to be unprecedented. It's going to be scary. It's going to take everything we've got as a country to beat this. We're going to need to socially distance. We're going to need to change our habits. We're going to need to suffer real economic pain. We are going to need to listen to our doctors. We are going to need to build all the medical equipment we need. We're going to need to build testing. And I'm going to demand that companies shift their operations to make this a priority. And I'm going to ask you all to join me in this. This is us together. We're going to do this. Donald Trump could have done that. Anybody who, really cares about the people that they want to lead, or B, was not so arrogant as to think they could ride this out without that, would have taken that approach. It's how you lead people through trauma and through difficulty. But Trump didn't do that. The Trump administration did not. They denied, diminished, avoided, fabricated through the early days and months. And because of that, they provided an opening for the Democrats to gain a lot of ground, whoever it was going to be. And in this case, it is Joe Biden, to gain a lot of ground. And as a result, this entire election now is going to be about the coronavirus. That is what this is about. In 1992, the Clinton campaign had a saying that many of you know, that it's the economy, stupid. That it was really about the economy, that George H.W. Bush's aloofness from the economy and the crisis that was occurring in the recession was going to be the key story in that election. And it was. This election is about the coronavirus. First, last, and full stop. Okay? And this brings us, and because of this means that the presidency and the person, the way in which he, in this case, he leads is the entire story. How has Donald Trump led through this? And would Joe Biden lead differently? Okay. Now, in the United States, the presidency really operates two different ways for us. It operates one way and it operates another way. Okay. First, or one way that the presidency operates is that as a ceremonial head of state, almost like a king or queen. There's somebody who represents the country, who attends high-profile things, appears in public to support, encourage, challenge, assuage the general public, but it's very ceremonial. Okay. A second way that the presidency is experienced in America is that this person manages us as a country. This person pulls levers, makes decisions, hires personnel, fires personnel, has to move pieces on a chessboard in order to build a stronger, more effective country. These two dimensions, these two ways of experiencing the presidency are not in conflict with each other, not at all. They are different ways, though, that we might experience the presidency. And so I want to talk about each of them a little bit, all right? As a ceremonial head of state, really what we're talking about is who are we as a group of people? It's really an identity function. How does the president act, and how does the president suggest we should act? This is often about values, okay, and about kind of behaviors, but in a fairly abstract way. The manager of the nation is about how we are. How are we doing? How are we feeling? How are we doing economically? How's our health? How's our morale? So a ceremonial head of state president, when functioning that way, is really about kind of crafting a vision or an identity of who we are. Like, we're America, all right? This is who America is. The manager of the nation is hands-on, affecting how we are. How are we doing? How is this country doing? And he in this case has always been a he, pulls various levers, pursues different policies, does and says certain things, and it's about how we're doing. Okay, so these are very different things. One, we experience in terms of thinking about who we are as a country, like, who are we? And then the other one is about how are we doing? How are we doing? The ceremonial head of state is really an abstract leadership approach. It's not something that most of us feel or experience on a daily basis. If the president does something stupid at an international gathering or tweets out 20 horrible things on a Sunday like he did yesterday, then the reality is that it doesn't make us feel good about who we are. But it really has no impact on us in terms of how we are, okay? The manager of the nation kind of leadership, though, is one that is directly felt when he pursues certain economic policies or issues certain immigration decrees or decides that certain medical doctors are not going to be given the ability to testify before Congress, as this president has decreed for the month of May, then the reality is that this directly affects us. It has an implications upon us. When he talks about using disinfectant as a way to beat COVID-19, this has a direct effect on who some of us are. All right. So ceremonial head of state is abstract, doesn't really affect us that much. It affects how we think about ourselves, but it doesn't directly affect us on a daily basis. The manager of the nation is directly implicating us. It affects us. Okay. Ceremonial head of state, here's the reality. This may not be a reality of people on this who are viewing this lecture, but the reality in America is that Americans are really split in their views of Trump as kind of a figurehead of this country. Some people are absolutely appalled and embarrassed and humiliated and outraged and offended. And I would say the composition of those skews fairly highly among people watching this. But there are an awful lot of other Americans who are saying to Donald Trump, you go, man. You represent us. You stand for us. You make us laugh. you stick the knife metaphorically in people in certain ways. You say offensive things, and we like that because that's not politically correct. So whether or not this is something that we all can understand, I want to assure you that the American public is split in whether or not they think Donald Trump is a good representative of America. And this has confused and angered progressives to no end. But when you get outside of Seattle, it's clear that there are many people that see in this president somebody that they really, really dig. Okay? They say, you are a good representative of us. When we look at manager of the nation, what's happening right now is that there is a majority viewpoint of Trump on COVID. The country has been fairly split on him, and maybe even slightly positive on Trump as a manager of the nation. This item makes no sense to me because there's so many things that this president has done that outrage me. But when you look at public opinion data, the public has had a pretty good impression of Donald Trump as a manager of our economy, a fairly good impression of Donald Trump in his management of foreign policy and immigration. And when COVID started as an outbreak, they were split in terms of their views on Trump. But over time, a majority of viewpoint, not a consensus viewpoint, but a majority viewpoint has begun to emerge in people's impressions of Donald Trump in his leadership around coronavirus. And that viewpoint is negative. It's not positive. It could have been. It could easily be. Many governors in this country have extremely positive public opinion behind them for their leadership around COVID. But the president doesn't. And I want to talk about this. And let me just kind of cut to the chase a little bit, that whites who were giving Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt on a lot of things have started moving toward where people of color have been in their impressions of Donald Trump for some time. Whites not being targeted by Trump in the same way that his policies have hurt people of color, particularly immigrants, whites have generally had a more positive view of Donald Trump. White women voted in a majority for Donald Trump, and white men very strongly voted in a majority for Donald Trump. Those perceptions have stayed there, although white women have soured on Trump fairly slowly over time. But whites as a group have started moving towards more negative viewpoints of Donald Trump during COVID-19, getting closer to where people of color have long been. Okay. I want to show some data on this. I want to talk a little bit about this, and I want to think about three kind of metrics, three kind of ways in which the public thinks about that latter point B, the manager of a nation. What are the three ways that the kind of country thinks about how the kind of quality of managing the country? So over time, as a professor, I had the chance to do a lot of research on what we'll call kind of impressions or perceptions that people have of political leaders. And there's all kinds of ways that people form impressions and perceptions. Sometimes we form them based upon our media, our interactions with media. Sometimes we form them based upon our political party affiliations. If you are a strong partisan, you have a predisposition to think that people who share your partisan identity, you have a better perception of them to start. Sometimes we form it in a generational or a racial set of characteristics, or certainly gendered characteristics. And over time, we begin to distill these into three quadrants of thinking. We begin to think about the competence of political leaders. How intelligent are they? Do they have the ability to do something? Can they execute? So over time, do they do what they say they're going to do? this is a bucket that researchers, political scientists, communication scholars, sociologists, psychologists will often call the bucket of competence. It is an impression of whether somebody is competent. Are they smart? Do they have talent? And can they deliver? Okay. A second bucket of assessing leadership is what we call integrity. This is about the ethics or moral character of someone. Is someone honest? Is someone trustworthy? Like, honesty is, do they tell the truth? Trustworthiness is like, can you expect them to do what they said they're going to do? That's not execution. Execution over incompetence is can they do it? In integrity, it's will they do what they've said? And what are the core kind of moral dimensions of who they are? If Barack Obama had the moral character of Donald Trump, he never would have had a chance to run for any higher office. He had to be almost perfect on his kind of moral character. I'm not putting him up on some kind of like pedestal, but I'm saying that there were no scandals in the Obama administration, whereas Trump is like a scandal a day. And so integrity is something we assess our leaders on. And then third, we assess them on empathy. Does a leader care for other people? Does that leader have compassion? Do they feel things with others? And relationally, can they connect with people? Can they literally connect and build a bond with individuals? This last characteristic, empathy, was where Bill Clinton was so very good. The famous kind of slang reference of he could feel people's pain. And it is because he would often say, I feel your pain. This is the phrase he would use. These three characteristics are commonplace leadership evaluations that we have for people that we're going to elect or consider re-electing for office: competence, integrity, and empathy. Notice I've used the red, white, and blue color scheme here. And I know it has a little Mickey Mouse ears kind of look here. But, that's okay. These are three characteristics that we evaluate political leaders, and especially presidential leaders, and especially in times of crisis on. So I want to go to the second poll question of the night then, our second and last poll question of the night. Of these three, what do you think is the most important evaluation when you look at voters? So if you're saying voters put the greatest weight upon which of these three among presidents, particularly in times of leader. So Paul, who's producing this, is going to pop up the poll, and we're going to see. Go ahead, you on Zoom, please. Select which one of these you think is the most important to the public. It's fun to see the poll data come in. All right, we're at over 90% of folks on Zoom have voted for this. And we have the most likely choice among Zoom viewers of what the public would most prioritize. What does the public want the most in times of crisis? The number one choice among Zoom viewers is empathy, at 43% of our Zoom watchers on this. Number two is competence at 32%, so right at 1/3. And number three is integrity. All right. So the Zoom folks watching this lecture have selected empathy as their number one, competence as their two, integrity as their three. Okay, so here's what the public actually prioritizes in terms of thinking about political leadership, presidential leadership in times of crisis. The public puts competence at the top, and then empathy, and then integrity. The public wants somebody who can be smart, or at least surround themselves with smart people, who has the ability or is surrounded by people who have the ability, and then executes, delivers. Because we're often confused and we're scared, and we need folks to lead us and to guide us. And so we're looking for somebody that can execute in difficult times. And then number two is empathy. Do they connect with us? Do they care about us? All right. Those two are the most important. And then integrity is number three. Do they tell us the truth? Are they trustworthy? In the Trump presidency, the entire Trump presidency before coronavirus was based upon an argument that he was competent on the economy, that his leadership on economic matters was tremendously competent, that he was smart, that he was surrounded by smart economic people, and that he was delivering a very good economy, low unemployment, high GDP, very high stock market, higher rising wages. So his entire argument for running for re-election was going to be competence around the economy. From the beginning, integrity has never been a strength of his, and the public has never seen it as a strength of his. So really, it's been about two dimensions for him, his presidency. It's been all competence, no integrity. And that's been fine. That's worked for him. He's not tremendously popular by any means, but the economics were so good that he was likely going to win re-election. All of the kind of political science models based upon economic indicators suggested that he would win the presidency. He would win re-election in 2020. So on one end, it's been competence. That's been his argument. Whether you agree with that or not is really an issue here. The public has seen him in very favorable light on the economy, and integrity has never been his issue. And so why progressives have been arguing about the fact that Trump lies and that the administration is full of crap and there's no moral core, it doesn't really matter to most of the public, because the competency is the much bigger thing. But with COVID-19, the Trump administration has not shown competency, and he lacks empathy completely, like totally. So he's now in a much more difficult space. And so I'm going to get rid of integrity, and I'm not going to talk about that anymore because it's really not relevant to this election. It wasn't relevant much in 2016. It hasn't been relevant for the presidency of Donald Trump, and it's not going to be relevant to the re-election. This election is coming down to these two things. It's a coronavirus election, and it's coming down to competence and empathy. And on one of them, well, let me just go through each of them. Okay. So let's think about Biden versus Trump on the first thing, competence. All right. When crises hit, Americans are initially generous to their leaders. They give them room to maneuver, to try to figure things out. Nobody expects the leaders to get it nailed down right away. Maybe that's a weakness in American public opinion. Maybe we should be tougher. Maybe we should expect leaders to preemptively address things, but we're more gracious than that. We do simply want presidents to be able to and our leaders to be able to respond when crises hit. So at first, there is what is called by scholars as kind of like the crisis generosity window, that we are open to giving space for leaders to figure things out, to kind of get their head wrapped around what's going on. Okay. But if leaders appear consistently incompetent over time and never get their heads wrapped around something and never begin to kind of get on top of a crisis, then there is really hell to pay. That the public will move out of that generosity space and move all the way to the other end of a continuum and begin to really be angry and resent because they're being directly affected by that poor management of the nation, directly affected by this. If you show competence, then you get to springboard out of that reservoir of generosity and get these massive public support moments. George W. Bush went from about 50% public approval to 90% public approval within the first 3 weeks after 9/11, because he looked like he was competent in what he was going to do. And I will say that in that span of time, George W. Bush made a massive transformation in his kind of public presentation of who he was. All right. He rose out of the generosity of that, and that generosity carried him all the way through the Iraq War and re-election until he got to Katrina. Okay. But out of that generosity reservoir, if you do not show competence as a leader, then the American public swings all the way to the other end and gets mad because they are suffering the consequences of it. All right. So here's some examples. Lyndon Johnson in Vietnam, as it became apparent that he was not competent about this, that there wasn't a plan, that he was kind of moving from this to that, and that things weren't happening the way that he said they're going to happen. Well, clearly he paid a massive political price from protesters, from marchers, from the political establishment, from other Democratic candidates who challenged him. A massive price. We saw Jimmy Carter pay a big price with the Iran hostage crisis. If you look at public opinion in 1979, late 1979, when the American embassy citizens are taken hostage in Iran, Carter's public approval ratings are pretty popular, pretty good at first. Public rallies behind him. But then over time, they begin to doubt his competence and his public approval ratings begin to decline dramatically. Okay. We saw this with George H.W. Bush on the economy in 1991 and 92. Bush was perceived as not being competent, not being able to bring about an end to the recession. You remember the famous moment when at a debate, he was caught kind of in the background looking at his watch, like, hey, what time is it? I got something better to do. It all fed this notion of incompetence, that this guy was out of touch with real people, with the realities of the economy. These are all instances where presidents have paid a price for incompetence. George W. Bush paid an enormous political price after Hurricane Katrina. It was apparent that he didn't know what he was doing, that he wasn't on top of FEMA, that his leadership skills were not there. It eventually cost the Republicans the House of Representatives and the Senate in 2006, and a downward trend that led to Barack Obama's election in 2008. John McCain, with the economic crash in September of 2008, Obama and McCain were neck and neck in 2008. And there was a period of time shortly after the nomination of Sarah Palin where John McCain surged ahead of Barack Obama. But McCain's lack of understanding around the economy and some things he had to say about that, and the lack of competence that Sarah Palin displayed, which reflected on John McCain because he selected her, led people to question the competence of McCain as a potential president. And even with Barack Obama, with the Affordable Care Act launch and the healthcare.gov, this was a low moment in terms of his appearance of competence, his ability to manage a massive rollout of a new public policy program. And you remember all of the scrambling and some folks in Seattle who had to come and join and do work with the Obama administration to fix the healthcare.gov kind of applications and online portals to getting healthcare. All of these are moments where the public swung from thinking or hoping there was competence to the other end where they concluded there was not. And they were mad and frustrated, and political opponents seized on it as well. Okay. What happened with Donald Trump is that his daily briefings laid bare his incompetence. Donald Trump, on a daily basis, came before the American public for more than a month with his daily press briefings and showed his incompetence, his lack of knowledge, his inability to follow through on any kind of plan or to even craft a plan, and then his inability to execute a plan. One day he's a wartime president, the next he's a victim. One day he's praising governors, the next day he's in arguments with them. One day there's going to be a vaccine, the next day there's not. One day, many days, it's going to go away, and then it's going to be a disaster. That is not the mark of competence. It's the mark of an erratic, inconsistent leader that cannot execute, doesn't have the intelligence, doesn't have the ability, doesn't have the people around him, or if he does, he's not willing to defer to them. And his incompetence was laid bare. Okay. What I want to show is 3 graphs that speak to this impression of Trump that grew over time. This is from a really wonderful data set by Navigator Research. Navigator Research has been doing polling on a daily basis on the coronavirus back since early February. Across the bottom of this figure are dates. I'm starting with late March with this. In late March, the line at the top, which I'm showing you a little bit of, is the public approval of Donald Trump's handling of the coronavirus pandemic. In late March, a little over 50% of the public approved. The line at the bottom was the percent of the public disapproving of Donald Trump's handling of the coronavirus. It was much lower. We're talking in the low 40s. So Trump was being seen in late March as doing a pretty good job on coronavirus. It was not long after this that he began his daily briefings. So I want to unfold that public approval assessment on coronavirus over time. Okay. And we get all the way till April 10th ish. And he no longer has a kind of majority of the public thinking he's doing a good job. It's really neck and neck. People are seeing, they're really mixed on him. So they're mixed on their views of Trump when we get to about the 10th of April. And there, progressively, it gets worse for Trump over time. So we get all the way till the beginning of May, and Donald Trump is seen as not doing a good job by a long shot. That the numbers have completely flipped from where they were back at the end of April. I'm sorry, at the end of March. They've completely flipped. What the public has concluded is that Donald Trump is not doing a good job handling the coronavirus. And so for everybody in the Democratic kind of world who has PTSD from 2016, electoral trauma from 2016, and thinks that like the public is never going to really turn on this guy. And actually, the public has concluded that he doesn't know what he's doing on the coronavirus. And the only reason those numbers get slightly better for him at the end of April and early May is because he stops doing the briefings. Okay. Unfortunately, he can't stay out of it. He goes off to the Lincoln Memorial and says that, hey, I've been treated worse than folks, and there's going to be a vaccine here really soon. He begins to say things again that just aren't true. All right. So the public has concluded that he does not know what he's doing on the coronavirus. Okay. Here's a set of words that people were asked. Does this word apply to Donald Trump's coronavirus responses? This is polling data right at the end of April. So this is not over time. This is data right at the end of April. And the public is asked a series of negative words and a series of positive words about Trump. So I'll first show you the negative words. Is Trump self-absorbed? Well, 64% of folks say yes. Is he unprepared? 63% say yes. Erratic, 60%. Chaotic, 55. Irresponsible, 55. Clear majorities saying that this guy, his leadership, his ability to be smart, to execute, to follow through, not good. They also asked a series of positive words. These are words that Trump would want people to say he is. All right. And we have less than 50% and down considerably on all of these positive words. People saying he's not serious by a 49-47 ratio. He's not presidential by a significant gap. He's not competent. He's not compassionate. He's not honest. I will say the last two are really not so much about competence. Compassionate is about empathy, and honesty is about integrity. So I can't take them off the graph though, because this is Navigator Research's figure. So I'll leave them on there as a point of comparison, but I'm really, under the heading of competence, most interested in the first 8. These are all competence assessments. On all of them, Donald Trump is viewed negatively. All right? Viewed negatively. All right, one more piece of data on Trump. This is also Navigator Research, and people are asked, please indicate who you trust more to respond to the coronavirus outbreak, President Trump or Democrats in Congress. When we go back to late March, Trump had an advantage on this. The public was saying, we trust Trump more than Democrats. Let's look at it, how it unfolds over time. By the time we get to the end of April, Democrats have pulled away as more trustworthy on this. Just one second. Good night, Sammy. Love you, bud. You're my boy. Yep, sleep good. Okay, got to say goodnight to my son. That's like a non-negotiable. By the time we get to the end of April, Democrats in Congress are much more trusted than Donald Trump on the coronavirus outbreak. And it's not because the Democrats in Congress have been providing this incredible leadership. They've just provided some leadership. They've gotten some bills passed along with Republicans. And Trump has been such an incompetent individual that Democrats look better. It's also the Democrats also benefit from the many Democratic governors around the country who are providing a model of what Democratic leadership can look like. An Andrew Cuomo, a Gretchen Whitmer, a Steve Sisolak. These folks really serve as a surrogate for Joe Biden right now of what a Democratic leader could look like. So over time, Donald Trump has increasingly been viewed as incompetent among the general American public. These numbers have taken hold. They are there now, all right? And so I want to finish this piece about competence by offering what I'm going to say is a suggestion for Biden. Biden will emerge eventually to campaign. And I think before that, he should create a war cabinet of his top advisors on the coronavirus and the economy. And he should announce this cabinet to the general public. And he should say, these are my advisors. These are my medical advisors. These are my public health advisors. These are the economic experts that are going to help me to rebuild this economy. If he put those all together, and I use the term war cabinet to refer to what Churchill and Roosevelt did in World War II, they put together a group of core advisors who were there for them to give them advice on a very close, confidential, regular basis. If Biden did this and put it together and put if she's not the VP nominee, she might be Elizabeth Warren in this, as well as some real tremendous economic experts, Robert Reich, then the reality is that this would convey a competence that Biden would bring, in contrast to the daily chaos of the Trump administration. Today, they get into big arguments with the Centers for Disease Control about the kind of fatalities and casualties, the cases and the likely deaths that are going to come up. This is an internal to the same governmental leadership arguing with one another. I think that Biden has a tremendous competence opening. I don't know if he's tremendously competent, but the fact is that he was vice president for 8 years. He did oversee the Ebola pandemic response. He did play a significant role in the passage of healthcare. he has been a senator for a long time. So the bar is not high to be more competent. And the American public, with their generosity, is just looking for some from the president. All right. The second bit here on Trump versus Biden that I want to talk about is empathy. And here, there really isn't even a competition here. You're talking about two ends of the continuum. Joe Biden at one end, Donald Trump at the other end. For the president, empathy is not an essential thing. Competence is first and foremost the most important thing because of the direct impact upon as a manager of the nation. But empathy is always valuable. There's never a downside to it to show that you care about people and connect with them. But when crises hit and pain becomes distributed among the public, empathy becomes a necessary condition for presidents. Because there's a lot of things presidents can't control that cause pain. But what presidents can control is how they react to it and how they treat the people affected by the pain. So presidents can't control a lot of things, but they can control how they seek to comfort and connect with people in the midst of pain. All right. Here's some examples. Ronald Reagan with the Challenger explosion. When the Challenger exploded, Reagan gave one of his most famous speeches about these folks soaring close to the sun and, you know, forever going to be kind of in this pantheon of American heroes. It was really one of Reagan's finest moments as president, the way he comforted people, millions of Americans, many young, who were watching on television when the Challenger exploded. All right. Bill Clinton with the economic recession and Clinton's famous kind of, I feel your pain approach to people, and the way he would hug people and be Bubba, his mythic personality, and always feel like he was emotionally present for people. It was a superpower. Bill Clinton had an empathic superpower. George W. Bush, after 9/11, went to New York and stood on the rubble there and connected with the firefighters and the first responders. And he said, I'm with you. And they said back to him, we're with you, George. They said this about their president. And the American public responded strongly. I had many very progressive friends who said to me after 9/11 that, look, I didn't vote for this guy and he's not my choice, but I'm behind him. I'm getting behind him. We need to get behind him in this moment. That his initial kind of empathic response on the night of 9/11, George W. Bush came on and gave a speech from the Oval Office, and he quoted Psalm 23 and talked about kind of comforting and walking through the shadow of death. All right. This may not be my cup of tea, those specific words, although I got nothing against Psalm 23. But the empathy was vital and essential at that moment. Okay. Obama was just too many moments of tremendous loss and pain. Gabby Giffords and others being shot in Tucson, Arizona. The Newtown shootings in Connecticut, the school shootings there. The Pulse nightclub shootings in Orlando. The mass shootings in Las Vegas. And the Mother Emanuel murders in Charleston, where Barack Obama sang Amazing Grace. That's an empathic moment for a president. All right. The commander in chief in times of crisis must be the consoler in chief. You have to show that you care about the people. You may not be able to do anything, but you have to care about them. I've heard the stories, I've read the articles about George W. Bush meeting with victims, the surviving families of victims of 9/11. I've heard and read about Barack Obama meeting one-on-one with the parents at Newtown in Tucson. It's a very, very difficult job for presidents. But it is something that in the American presidential kind of portfolio, it's expected. You don't have to be incredible, but you've got to be at least decent as an empathic individual. All right. Donald Trump lacks the empathy gene. I don't know if he wasn't born with it or if he's just destroyed it in himself personally. I don't know whether he learned it from his father or from his work in the public arena. It is not a hating on Donald Trump statement to make this statement. He lacks empathy. He lacks it. Okay. The Washington Post did an analysis of his briefings from the late March through the end of April. They took 6 weeks of his briefings. They analyzed them. This is the kind of thing I would do as a researcher, a professor at the university. They did a content analysis of his briefings. What did he have to say in there? What did they have to say? Across 35 briefings, there were a total of 28 Trump speaking hours. So he spoke total 28 hours across 35 briefings. Might seem like a lot more than that, but this is what they found, okay? They did a specific deeper dive analysis across the final 3 weeks, that window of time when the American public begins to sour on Donald Trump's leadership of coronavirus. They did an analysis of a deeper analysis to try to understand what was he saying in that span of time. In those final 3 weeks of this 6 week window, there are 13 hours of Trump speaking, 13 hours. So 13 hours, half a day, a little over half a day. In those 13 hours total across those 3 weeks, there were 2 hours that he spent attacking and criticizing political opponents, the Chinese, governors. He spent 2 of those 13 hours attacking folks. It's a little over 15% of that time. Okay. He spent 45 minutes of those 13 hours saying things about himself that are praiseworthy. Again, I know it seems like more, but 45 minutes is a lot of time to spend praising yourself across 13 hours in there. You know, you're talking almost 1/13 here. So you're talking about 7%-ish of that amount of time. In the midst of a coronavirus in which more than 1 million people now have cases, in which almost 67, 68,000 people have died, to spend any time in there praising himself is absurd. He spent 45 minutes of that. He spent exactly 4.5 minutes expressing condolences for people who were lost. 4.5 minutes. 1/10 the amount of time he spent praising himself. Any good political leader should come out, start, end, and infuse all the way through their remarks with sympathy, a sense of sadness that we're in it together and that I'm so sorry. We're going to fight and fight and fight to try to fix this. For Trump, no, none. The Washington Post went further and looked at those 4.5 minutes, and they were almost all in scripted remarks, things that he came out to say, and he read this material. It was not off the cuff or in a Q&A with people. He spent 9 minutes promoting chloroquine, this anti-malarial drug that he had an obsession with. Twice as much time as he expressed condolences. Donald Trump is the anti-empathy president, okay? The public is convinced that he's incompetent on coronavirus, or a majority is, and it's clear to anybody watching that he doesn't exhibit the kind of empathy that we need or that we want from a president. Biden endorsers have highlighted this trait with Biden. This is a superpower attribute of Joe Biden. If there's one core thing that Joe Biden exudes, just absolutely bubbles over with, is empathy. You go see Joe Biden at a political event, and Joe Biden will spend all of his time, if it was up to him, talking with, hugging, grasping the hands, hearing people, crying with them. The man exudes relationality and connection with people. Yeah, it can be a problem. It's clear. And he's had to adjust the way in which he touches or reaches out to people over time. It's a different world from when he was earlier in his political career. But the heart that's behind that, this is his superpower, okay? Here's some of the words that his endorsers have said. Jim Clyburn, you've heard, you saw the endorsement I played from him, or you listened to it last time. I know Joe, we know Joe, but more importantly, Joe knows us. That's an empathy statement. Joe knows us. Amy Klobuchar said, President Trump has no empathy and cannot put himself in the shoes of the people of this country. Well, guess who can do that? That's Joe Biden. It was amazing to me to see Klobuchar out in the campaign in both Iowa and South Carolina, talking about the importance of empathy. She was making the case that she offered it. But I think she was making the case that because she recognized that the empathy that she or any Democratic candidate could offer was a point of massive contrast with Donald Trump. She is correct when she endorses Biden that this is something Biden can offer. Barack Obama, in his endorsement video of Joe Biden, said he's referring to Biden, he's someone whose own life has taught him how to persevere, how to bounce back when you've been knocked down. Joe has the honesty and humility, the empathy and the grace to lead America. And Elizabeth Warren, in her endorsement, said, empathy matters. And in this moment of crisis, it's more important than ever. Now, all of these speak to these people's perceptions of seeing empathy in Joe Biden. And they also speak to a very clear strategic emphasis by Biden's campaign to highlight empathy in the remarks of endorsers. Endorsers don't just walk out and say whatever they're going to say during interviews or on a stage. They are, you could say, coached or at least encouraged to hit certain themes that the candidate themselves wants to accentuate. The fact that empathy keeps recurring all the time in all of these very high profile endorsements is indicative of a messaging strategy, all right? Which is indicative that there's a competence in the campaign, that they can drive a message forward. This is what we don't see from the Trump presidency. What is the message on COVID? It changes per day. The message from Biden and Biden's supporters is that this president, Joe Biden, this candidate, if he becomes president, will care. He will bring empathy, okay? And the public sees much more of that empathy in Biden, okay? In a Quinnipiac University poll in March, the statement was asked, which one of these two people cares more about average Americans? And it contrasted Biden versus Trump, and 59% to 43%. This was not a head-to-head. This was simply a question about whether this person cared about average Americans. And so you could say yes to Biden, you could say yes to Trump, you could say yes to both of them. 59% of folks said yes, Joe Biden cares about average Americans. Only 43% said Donald Trump cares about average Americans. And then just last week, a USA Today and Suffolk poll asked the similar kind of question, cares about people like me, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And on this one, this was a head-to-head poll. All right, this was which one cares about people like me. and Joe Biden much more likely to be selected than Donald Trump. The numbers are very similar across these polls, 6 weeks apart. Biden has a clear, 60 to 40% advantage on this, on empathy in this time of crisis. So I want to conclude this part on empathy with suggesting a thing that I think Joe Biden could do when he, one more thing I want to say. This is Biden's digital director in a story in Politico yesterday saying that the suburban Facebook empathy moms that we think about a lot, those folks are hungry for the contrast between the darkness of Donald Trump and the goodness of Joe Biden. That is a strategic campaign message right there, folks. And this new phrase, the suburban Facebook empathy moms, are clearly a target population in this election. They are folks that swung towards the Democrats in 2018 and that they swung and voted for Joe Biden in the Democratic primary, and the Democratic campaign of Biden thinks that they can win these. When you've got the digital director talking about this, the suburban Facebook empathy moms, these are the new soccer moms of this election. Here's my suggestion for Joe Biden, that when he emerges from his camp, when he emerges from his basement, that he should embark on a 2-week trip, meeting with recovering Americans, families who've lost loved ones, and workers hit by the recession. He should go to those Midwestern states. He should go to New York, not a key battleground state, but obviously a hot spot. He should go to Florida. He should go to Arizona. He should come here. We're not a key political state for the presidency, but we were the first epicenter in the country. But he should go. He should meet with these folks. He should hug them. He should show them that he cares. That's what Biden should do. And I think he will do this. So I want to show you, I want to try something else I haven't done here. I'm going to try to play a video. I haven't been playing videos during these lectures because I wasn't sure how well it would work on Zoom, but I think we got it now that we can play it. We're going to try it tonight. This is a short video. It's 30 seconds long, and it's from a tweet that Joe Biden sent out on the last day of April, April 30th. And it speaks to this issue of empathy. Okay, I'm going to try to play this here.
It's April the 29th. By the end of this month, we have lost more people with the coronavirus dead than we lost in the entire Vietnam War. Americans lost in the entire Vietnam War. And you know, I think the president should lower the flag on the White House to half-mast to recognize their loss and all they leave behind, all those families they leave behind. Many of them were first responders who gave their lives trying to save other lives. Folks, I think if he does not do that, when I'm president, I promise you that's what I'll do. They should be recognized. It's April.
Okay, so I'm hoping that came through okay. I'll get some feedback from our producer afterwards. But he has this interesting phrase in there. They should be recognized. He says it several times. Recognized. I will recognize them. They should be recognized. And he indicates that kind of ultimate honor we have in America to honoring the loss of a important citizen in our public. The lowering of the flag to half-mast. What an interesting symbol. What a powerful symbol to say that we recognize and we care about the Americans. So this is a characteristic that Joe Biden brings to this campaign that can help him to win. All right, I'm going to finish with this. I started with the 2016 map, and I want to think about it relative to 2020 now. This is the map in 2016 after the election. This is the map we saw at the beginning of this lecture. And I said that, hey, look, those were the key states in the 2016 election: Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. But I actually have expanded that loop a little bit. There are some other key states that are going to matter in the upper Midwest in 2020. So this is the 2020 map. It is still Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, but Ohio is going to matter. Iowa is going to matter. Minnesota is going to matter. Iowa and Illinois aren't really going to matter that much. Illinois is going to go strongly Democratic, and Indiana is going to be strongly Republican. But they're in the middle of the map. I couldn't draw the oval, skipping them. This oval, though, I put it up here to say it's not about just those three states: Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. It's about more states. It's about Ohio is going to be competitive this time around. Iowa is going to be competitive, and Minnesota, which Clinton won, Biden has the potential to win it bigger. But it isn't just the upper Midwest in 2020. There's also this Southeast corridor. North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida are all very competitive states in this election. South Carolina is not going to be competitive at the presidential level, but possibly could be competitive at the U.S. Senate level, with Jamie Harrison challenging Lindsey Graham. But three of those four states, very competitive in this election: North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And then there's this other cluster right out here of Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and possibly Texas. Okay. Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico all went for Clinton. Biden should be able to hold those, but he's got a great shot to win in Arizona as well, and possibly can get close, and who knows what, in Texas. All three of these things are much wider electoral map for potential success for Joe Biden in 2020. And here's what an expanding map can look like if indeed things unfold the way that they could for the Biden campaign. This is my last slide. Here's some data that compares 2016 to now on the 8 closest states that Donald Trump won in 2016. The actual overall closest state was New Hampshire. Hillary Clinton won it. So I don't have it on this list. These are the 8 closest states that Donald Trump won in 2016. And this is the percentage points that he won those states by. Those are percentage points. He literally won Michigan by 0.2 of a percentage point, all the way up to Texas by 9 percentage points, and Ohio at 8.2. These are 8 states that Donald Trump won in 2016. Okay. As for this lecture, I went and looked at polling in all of these states from within the last 8 days. So I'm not going back to polling pre-coronavirus. I'm looking at after the public has made this determination about the competency and an assessment of the empathy of Donald Trump. I want to see where they're at. So these 8 states that Donald Trump won, all of them in 2016, where are we at right now in the polling data? And it's important to look state by state, because we know that the presidential election is 51 electoral college elections. It's 50 states plus the District of Columbia. There are 51 separate elections. In 2020, the polling data within the last 8 days looks like this across these states. This is how Trump is doing across these states. He's losing by 7 in Michigan. He's losing by 6 in Pennsylvania. He's losing by 2.5 in Wisconsin, by 3 in Florida, by 4 in Arizona, by almost 4 in North Carolina, and he's only barely winning in Ohio and Texas. Holy crap. You might have read a Washington Post story over the weekend in which it talked about Donald Trump getting outraged at his campaign manager, Brad Parscale, because Parscale gave him some data and showed Trump losing support across many key battleground states. And Trump said, "I don't believe you. This is horse shit. I don't believe it." And he started swearing and yelling, and he threatened to sue Parscale about this. because this is what Trump always will do. He'll sue. Okay. The electorate has swung towards the Democrats generally in the presidency and towards Joe Biden specifically. As of now, there are no guarantees, but this is a very strong position for a challenger president, a challenger candidate to be in. But it isn't just the presidency. As Trump has flailed on the coronavirus, the Senate itself has begun to swing towards Democrats. The Senate is at least as important as a presidency because of the ability to approve federal judges for lifetime appointments, including Supreme Court justices. And so who wins the Senate is going to be very, very important. And all of these Republican senators, all 52 out of the 53, all voted to acquit Donald Trump on impeachment. And so they now bear the responsibility for Donald Trump continuing as president during coronavirus. And so I just finished with this. This is Harry Enton, who is the primary political analyst for CNN. And he tweeted this 2 days ago. A year ago, I wrote that Republicans were favored to hold the Senate. Based on my modeling of past years, the Senate now slightly tilts towards the Democrats, a fairly major reversal. And where's that tilting happening in the Senate? It's happening in the state of Arizona, where Mark Kelly is challenging Martha McSally. In the state of Colorado, where John Hickenlooper or Andrew Romanoff are going to challenge Cory Gardner. In Maine, where Sarah Gideon will challenge Susan Collins. In Iowa, where Teresa Greenfield is 1 point behind in a poll today, Joni Ernst. In 2 elections in Georgia. In North Carolina, where the Democrat Cal Cunningham is leading the Republican Tom Tillis right now. So on both of these indicators, the presidency and the US Senate, the landscape is tilted towards the Democrats today. Okay. Joe Biden can win this election. There's going to have to make a number of strategic choices along the way. But he is a known entity. He is not somebody who's trying to unveil himself to the American public. He runs on a record of being known already. That's a strong position for somebody to run if they're doing well. If they're not doing well, that is a very difficult position to be in. But he's doing well against Trump right now, and the coronavirus is accentuating his strengths as a candidate. If they maximize these, if they present a competent, empathic worldview, if the Democrats running for the Senate hold Republican feet to the fire on Donald Trump, then the reality is the Democrats can win this election. They can. It was 6 months yesterday, May 3rd. It was 6 months till Election Day. 6 months till the day which this country makes a decision on who's going to be the next president, who's going to control the Senate, who's going to be in control of the House, many governorships, Supreme Court's elections in states around the country. 6 months to go. Joe Biden can win. That's what this lecture was about. These lectures were about how that could be done. I don't know if he's going to win. I simply know the ways in which he can win. It's possible that Donald Trump could pivot and dramatically build that competency and the empathy, but it's very, very difficult for someone to change their spots at this point in a presidency. Donald Trump was going to run on the economy. He doesn't have that in there anymore. It's going to be difficult for him to get that back. But it's his one thing that he's trying to get. It's one thing he's trying to do. This is why the push to reopen. Okay. I'm going to go off a screen here. I'm going to take a look at some questions now. Appreciate you all being here for all of this. Let's go to some questions. Okay, here's a question. I'm going to scroll up them as I go. But this one is from Mary. How does Joe Biden go out into the, here's the question. How does Joe Biden go out into the public and show closeness to voters and not risk getting coronavirus? oh man, this is strategically right up the alley of any good politician and campaign. You can go and do town hall conversations. You can go to doors and have like a way in which you quote unquote knock on a door, but you're standing 10 feet back and you're talking and you're showing connection to them. Candidates do this all the time in town hall meetings. There's this great clip of Bill Clinton in 1992 listening to this woman who's about 15 feet away from him in a town hall as she talks about her economic challenges. And the way that Clinton emotes in his face is like a master class in empathy. Joe Biden can do this no problem. You don't have to touch people. And given Biden's challenges with his own reputation of being a little too touchy, I think that actually this could really be to his advantage. He gets to show empathy without having to actually go over and hug people. I think that this is easily done. He could have people calling into television shows. He could do this. It needs to be something that he doesn't do right now because it feels a little manufactured. But when he can be out in the public, I'm certain that they can come up with campaign events that will make this very effective. A question about who do I think is the top people for the vice presidency. I'm going to reserve that for my vice president lectures. I'm going to do 2 lectures about the vice president. If you want to hear me talk about that, come on, let's go. Join up, sign up. You can go to Eventbrite and look for it. How do Biden's percentages rank up alongside Hillary Clinton's percentages at this point in 2016? Good question. So here it again is how does Biden's percentages rank in comparison to Hillary Clinton's at this point in 2016? In every single state I just showed you, he is significantly ahead of where Hillary Clinton was at this point. Hillary Clinton was ahead nationally by about 2 or 3 points. Joe Biden is ahead nationally by 6 to 7 right now. Okay. Clinton lost all of those states that I showed you, and she was neck and neck or slightly ahead in the top ones and very much behind in the latter half of that group that I showed. Biden is ahead of Clinton, and he has been ahead of Clinton relative to Trump from the beginning, and it's only strengthened since coronavirus. Okay, let me check it all out here. Let's see. Question here. If we have a good summer, and that's in quotes, a good summer's in quotes, and the number of the cases go way down, will the virus still be the focal point, or will it all be focused on the economy? Those are inseparable. The level of economic devastation tied to the coronavirus is inseparable from the coronavirus. So even if it were to pivot to being about not death, but about jobs and recovery, that is entirely driven by the coronavirus lack of preparation, inability to prepare the country and to get us through this. Also, the Trump himself. There's been some other interesting data that I didn't include in this presentation, which shows that the American public very much thinks that the stimulus data money so far has gone to support wealthy, big businesses, big organizations, and that Donald Trump favors them. I think this is part of why the Democrats have come to be seen as better leaders on this, as opposed to Trump, because Trump is seen as the wealthy, rich kind of surrogate on this. So I think that even if it gets to be more about the economy, that Donald Trump's story is damaged. He does have a chance if it becomes about the economy again. But I just don't think the possibility of separating the economy from the death toll and the illness toll is going to be possible. And if anything, I think that what we're seeing is all of these models of public health elevating their numbers and predictions, that we are not hitting the marks that we were hoping to hit as a socially distant public health body of folks. In fact, we're trying too quickly to come back from this, and it's pushing up the numbers again. Some of you are asking about whether I'm sending this data to Joe Biden. No, I'm not. He's not out there asking me for it. And there's some really smart people running the Biden campaign, and any campaign at that level. So no, I'm not an advisor to the Biden campaign, but I appreciate that. Very nice comments. Question: can Trump redeem himself at this point in terms of his handling of COVID-19? It's very, very hard to change a dominant perception of yourself as a politician without a major instigating event that allows you to show a different side of you. So is there a possibility of an event like that with Trump on COVID-19? It's hard to imagine. And the data only look to be getting less positive rather than more positive. So I don't think he can that he can redeem himself on COVID. I think he could possibly redeem himself on the economy if he can get it up and running again. And that's why they're going all in on this. Let's see. Do women care more about public health regarding votes? That's a good question, Jesse. Yes, women in general have soured more on Donald Trump than men. White women more than white men. And generally women have cared about the issue of healthcare as a political issue more than men for decades and decades. So yes, this feeds further into a kind of into the wheelhouse of the Democrats rather than into the strengths of Donald Trump. What about Biden's malaprops and his energy? The malaprops being his faux pas and things that he says that are, mistaken or not as well said as he could. Yeah, that's part of who Joe Biden is. And I don't actually think it hurts him at all unless he says something that's terrible. But I don't think it hurts him at all. It's part of who he is, part of the kind of Uncle Joe kind of persona. I don't think that that's a major issue at all. His ability to speak effectively or to say things that are, not if he says terrible things, that's not okay. That would hurt him. But just to make some kind of speaking errors and gets words mixed up and say sometimes that he's in the wrong state or gets the year wrong, that's not going to be relevant. Not when you're talking about more than 100,000 Americans dead from the coronavirus, which is we're on the trajectory that we're very clearly on. But what about his energy? Yeah, he's going to be less energy than Pete Buttigieg or Cory Booker or Kamala Harris. This is why his vice presidential nomination is going to be very important. In fact, we can make a very good case that this is the most consequential vice presidential nomination that we've ever had, or at least in the modern presidency. That's why I'm going to do a lecture series on the vice presidency to talk about that what the things that he can bring to the table with his vice presidential selection. What's the public perception of how Trump is handling the economy during COVID-19? Good question. It's gotten negative. It's not as negative as his general overall handling of COVID-19, but it has gotten negative. And it started from about a 65 to 35 positive perception of Donald Trump on the economy. And it's gone to about a 45 to 55 or 47 to 52 negative perception of Donald Trump on the economy. So it definitely has gotten negative on that dimension as well. What role can citizens play in demanding states get the infrastructure, the ballot printing machines for mail-in voting? Well, Nancy, as you well know, in Common Purpose, this is a major thing that we're doing on our work. You can go to our cpnow.org, and go to our advocacy page. And we have a step-by-step process to push people, to push senators, governors, and secretaries of state to adopt mail-in balloting and no excuse absentee balloting and more early voting. And then we are also making phone calls on our fieldwork page to get people to know how to get and use absentee ballots. We're doing this in the state of Wisconsin in a special election that's on May 12th in that state. And we're being asked by an increasing number of organizations and Democratic political party folks around the country to call voters in their states. And they give us the names and the numbers to help people through the process of getting absentee ballots. This is the entire endeavor. There is nothing more important than this this year. All right, I'm going to answer one or two more questions, and I'll end with the Tara Reade allegations, because I know a number of you have asked about that. Some of you are asking about Amy McGrath in Kentucky. Yeah, McGrath's got a real shot. She's got a real chance because McConnell's the most unpopular senator in the country, and he's made some mistakes during coronavirus. I would say that Amy McGrath still has to get out of the primary. There's a strong progressive candidate that she's running against in Kentucky, Charles Booker. McGrath is probably going to win, but it's not a slam dunk. And I think that race is going to be very close in this country, especially if coronavirus doesn't get much better, because McConnell is so tied to Trump, and he's responsible for not allowing voter legislation to go forward yet. And he's responsible for saying states should go bankrupt, which doesn't play well in any state. Does Justin Amash running as an independent hurt Biden or help Biden? I don't know. I really don't know, but I have a theory, and my theory is that the people that Amash will attract are Republicans who wouldn't vote for Trump and some chunk of them would have voted for Biden. So yes, Biden will lose those voters. They're conservatives who are not going to vote for Trump and we're going to vote, or some number of them are going to vote for Joe Biden. So Biden will lose those voters. Yes. But I'm not convinced that that's going to hurt Joe Biden in winning overall, because I think Biden can win this election, as can any Democrat win any election, on the strength of voter turnout. There are more Democrats, moderates, and liberals together combined than there are Republicans in this country. The issue is if you get them to turn out to vote. And I think Biden can get them to turn out to vote because Trump is the opponent. So there's enough voters in the Democratic camp who want to beat Trump who will turn out to vote. They may not be enthusiastic about Biden, as some of you might not be, but they are very enthusiastic about beating Donald Trump. And so to me, in my view, Biden loses some voters who are Republicans to Amash, but he doesn't lose any Democrats at all. There are no Democrats who are going to go from Joe Biden to Justin Amash in this election. Maybe if it was a different Republican out there, but not against Donald Trump. So Biden's going to hold the Democratic Party, whoever comes out. The job then is to get, if you're a Democrat, is to get the party voters out. Question about Milwaukee County changes. Were the Milwaukee County data, and for that matter, the Wayne County data, influenced by voter suppression? No question about it. No question about it. And what is voter suppression? That's going to be part of the lectures that I do tomorrow night and next Tuesday. It's the process by which certain people in this country, Republicans, have made it harder to vote for people of color and for younger people. And so absolutely, voter suppression in Wisconsin, where the Republicans have made it very hard to vote for college students and have reduced the number of polling locations in major urban areas, played a role in Wisconsin. Yep, this is why absentee balloting can be so important in that state and in Pennsylvania and in Michigan. All right, let me talk about Tara Reade. So last week I started this, and I'll end with this. I started this lectures by saying, look, these are serious allegations. And I don't know how they're going to play out, but I knew that they're going to play out. They are. And I don't think we're done yet. But the statement that Joe Biden delivered on Morning Joe on Friday, and then his written statement on Medium. Medium is a place where you can write a blog post and you can post your words, anything you want. Anybody can write for it. He posted a very long statement about it. I think have given him a sufficiency of position on this for now. And in response to this, Tara Reade canceled an interview on Fox that she was going to do, and has also said that she doesn't think that she and her the report that she said she filed, that she did not report sexual harassment, and she certainly didn't report sexual assault, she said. So now her claim has moved significantly of what she said or what she said she did. Now, I am fully of the mind that the issues of gender, power, and assault leads to many inconsistencies in people's stories. The trauma is real there. So the lack of consistency to me is never an absolute determinant in somebody's story. I continue to not know with certainty one way or another about this. But I do know a couple things with certainty. If I don't know that, there's a couple things I know with certainty. One, Joe Biden has a political record of having worked on behalf of women. He has a political record on doing that, even with the issues and struggles that he had and one of his worst hours with Anita Hill and the confirmation of Clarence Thomas. But he has a public policy record over time that is on behalf of women. He's got that as a record. Two, he has a number of very high profile women in the Democratic Party who are with him, who are standing by him shoulder to shoulder. Just today, Elizabeth Warren issued a statement saying that she considers what Joe Biden said on Friday to be more than sufficient. She finds it credible, and that she is proud to endorse Joe Biden. Okay. Nancy Pelosi, same thing. Amy Klobuchar, same thing. So he's getting no breakage in his kind of political wall for him. Third, I know for certain that he's running against a person who is potentially the absolute worst contrast candidate on this issue, on the issue of gender relations, that anyone could ever run against. Trump is horrible on this. So there are many Democrats who are going to weigh the Tara Reade allegations and say that, look, I don't know exactly what happened here, and I could see any politician doing these kind of terrible things because politicians get power drunk. But Joe Biden, in their view, is still going to be miles and miles better than the alternative. And that's a calculus that people make. It's a calculus that millions of Americans will make in this election. I think it will matter who Joe Biden selects as his VP because that person will be essentially somebody who will, by accepting the VP position, will be, and he's already said it's going to be a woman, will be vouching for him. And I also think it's really, really important, if nothing else comes out, nobody else on this matter for Joe Biden, then I think that he's by and large going to be just fine politically. If, however, other instances emerge, then every one of those begins to chip away at that credibility in a significant way. There has been nothing so far. And, there was a claim made over the weekend that was quickly disproven and not remotely close to based in evidence. And you've had a number of people who have investigated Joe Biden back when he was selected as VP, or have worked side by side with him for his entire career, who are saying that, look, we've never seen anything like this, anything like these kind of allegations in his life. So if Biden is able to go space with no other kind of like credible claims against him on this, I think he's fine. I think he's fine on this. But that's a daily thing. You don't know. If it's going to happen, we don't know. I will say, and I'm finishing here today now, Joe Biden can win this election. He is winning this election right now. I said earlier in this lecture that political pundits and experts will often say that the most important thing for a candidate is to be the right candidate at the right time. Joe Biden in this election was the right candidate at the right time. His experience with Ebola, his work on the pandemic, his lifetime of kind of credibility in government, and his empathy superpowers put him in the position at the right time. He can win this election. It's going to come down to a lot of things that people do around him, the people he puts around him, and the volunteers who do work on behalf of him. Hey, thanks everybody for spending these 2 nights with me, for being part of this. Your contributions, the money you've put towards this goes to support the work of a just and inclusive democracy. Tremendously appreciate that. Thank you all so much. Sign up for those other lectures, Voting Rights in America, starting tomorrow night. The lectures on the Vice President starting Sunday. And then lectures on American demagogues and how we can understand Donald Trump coming on May 14th and 21st. All right. Well, we're never going to have these sets of experiences again when I'm done doing all these lectures from my basement. I'll never be able to probably say goodnight to my son as he goes to bed and stand here and look out the window, or at least see daylight outside the window. It's been an honor to spend this time with you all. Thank you all. Take care. Be safe. Bye-bye.